Hi, my name is Todd Leonard.
And my name is Herb Montgomery, and we're just talking.
Thanks for taking a moment today to click on the like icon, to subscribe to our webcast if you haven't, and to click on the bell icon if you'd like to be reminded of upcoming episodes.
So each week, Todd, Leonard, and I take a moment to talk about the upcoming gospel readings from the lectionary, whatever's coming up this next weekend. And our goal is to talk about those passages from the Gospels in the context of love and inclusion and societal justice. Our hope is that our talking will be just talking, as in justice, but that also something might be said during this conversation that would inspire you alongside with us to do more than just talking. So, Todd, what passage are we looking at this week?
So we're looking at Mark chapter 8, verses 31 to 38. And when I pulled this up, it sure seemed familiar to me. And I I decided to look at our YouTube channel and see when we started this thing. And I found out, you know what? We have passed our first anniversary.
That's fantastic. We're 1 year old. Are we an infant? Are we a toddler? What are we?
We're immature, I know that. So anyway, man, it's been great to be with you for a year. And
Absolutely. Congratulations. Happy anniversary.
happy anniversary. We look forward to continuing on. So yeah, let's dig into Mark chapter 8.
So I'm just curious, when you looked at the passage and saw that we were a year old, um did we cover this? This passage seems to come up annually during Lent. Did we cover
I
this
think
passage
so.
last year?
I feel like we did. I didn't actually look at the text that went with the videos. Once I saw that we had just hit our year mark, I kind of got distracted by that. So, but it sure feels like we talked about this before.
Sure.
And
We've talked about the myth of redemptive suffering a lot.
For sure, for sure. So yeah, so this is in some ways this is will be kind of, if you've been with us for a long time, you probably will have heard some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. But certainly in the context of where we are in the lectionary, and if you're grabbing this Saturday afternoon as you're still preparing for your sermon on Sunday, it's still I think there's still worthwhile material here to look at.
Yeah, there's a lot to mine from. And it's one of those passages that every time I read it, I'm just reminded that there are certain sections of scripture that require a special intentionality and special care. This passage has been used, it's one that historically has been used to do a lot of harm from Christian theology. And so, I mean, the biggest one for me, and I'd be interested in you too, Todd. What misinterpretations or harmful applications you've encountered from the language of this passage? But I grew up with a single mom, and I watched, her go in and out of romantic relationships with men during her life, and I can remember one abusive relationship that my mother was in, and I'm proud of my mom because as she got older and she experienced more and her journey went on, she learned how to set up healthy boundaries in her life and to look out for red flags and to make those choices. But initially, when she was involved in an abusive relationship, she went to counseling one time with a pastor. And I'm always reminded that unless pastors actually have training in counseling, the pastoral degree does not imply a counseling degree, right?
That's right.
So that pastor used this very passage that we're looking at this week and encouraged her to be like Jesus, to bear her cross, to turn the other cheek, that quite possibly, just to be patient, to patiently endure, that quite possibly through her suffering, he went so far as to even say, that she might be able to change the heart and mind of her husband, and at that time, and just a mess. Um, So she was wise enough to not follow that counsel. But how many women have followed that counsel? And honestly, this isn't just theory or theology right now. That kind of counsel, that kind of interpretive lens on this passage has been lethal
That's right.
to quite a few women. And I say women, I know that women are not the only ones who suffer from violence in intimate relationships. I get that, especially non-heteronormative relationships. I don't want to promote heteronormativity here this morning, but my mom's my primary reference point. That, her and her experience is what I'm speaking out of, and my firsthand experience with this. But yeah, I think that, anytime, I mean, it just has a broader application than just women. But at the same time, women have suffered, lethally suffered. Women have lost their life from counsel like what
That's
I've
right.
just mentioned. And again, I'd
Yeah.
be interested in misapplications or harmful interpretations that you've heard too.
No, I mean, just to piggyback on that, I mean, I participated for many years in a couple different towns where I pastored with the local domestic violence shelters in annual candlelight vigils where we mourn the loss of life of often women, but again other individuals in different types of relationships who lost their lives in domestic violence, children who lost their lives in domestic violence. So that's certainly I'm familiar with, that where that's been where religion has reinforced and enabled abuse to continue. Most recently for me, I've seen it in the context of visiting patients at the hospital, where patients, in order to console themselves, have told themselves that this disease, this terminal illness, this prognosis is their cross to bear,
Mm.
and they somehow see that God has brought this upon them. God has allowed this to happen to them. God is teaching them something through this,
Mm.
and I try to reframe that thought with them, but it's difficult in the few moments I have with them. But it's sad for me to see, you know, and again, it's so often that those who are going through the suffering will embrace that toxic
Mm.
belief
Mm.
that's been reinforced in religious settings and in people's homes for generations. And it's, you see the victims doing as much to reinforce that thinking as the perpetrators or as the religious authorities.
Yeah. 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 And when we look at the passage this week, I mean, it's easy to make that mistake. I mean, Jesus says, if you want to follow him, you have to deny yourself
Hmm.
and take up your cross. Too often, whether it be the things that we're suffering or the injustices that we're suffering from the hands of others, um, we define the cross itself as that injustice. And when we do that, first of all, that's not consistent with the story, the context, the narrative context out of which this phrase was made, right? But when we define the abuse or the suffering um, as the cross, then what it leads us to is, well, we have no other choice as a Jesus follower than to patiently bear it, just
Mm.
passively endure.
Mm.
Um, but that's not what's in the story. The story is Jesus was speaking about out against the injustice of his own temple state. He
Hmm.
was setting his sights on Jerusalem. That's the immediate context. He was about to go to Jerusalem and engage in his civil disobedience, his protest, his demonstration there in the courtyard, overturning the temple, the tables of the money changers and of the marketplace there, and the way that and his motive in the synoptic gospels, not in the gospel of John, but in the synoptic gospels, his motive is not the holiness of sacred space. His motive is the people that are being harmed by that economic system, the
Right.
economically marginalized and disenfranchised, and he's speaking out in solidarity with the poor who are just being made poorer. Um, and And the cross in that context is what they threatened him with if he kept standing up and speaking out and calling for change. In other words, the narrative is it's assumed on the basis that you're already not just passively bearing the injustice or the abuse, that you're speaking out
Right.
already against the abuse, calling for change. And then the system or those in power or those that are threatened by that change, they're threatening you saying, sit down, shut up, or we're going to do this to you. And it's at that moment, in that context, that Jesus says, follow me. Don't be silent. Keep speaking out. Keep raising your voice. Keep calling for change. Be willing to bear a cross. And that's a different interpretation. That's when they try to silence you. Don't buy what they're either what they're trying to bribe you with, or don't fear what they're trying to threaten you with. Take up the cross, keep speaking out, keep calling for change.
Right. Which is, and that's exactly the opposite of what we see, like in the context of the pastor who counseled your mother, or what pastors and religious leaders just do in their general preaching today, which is continue your personal piety, continue bearing your suffering. In fact, Christ is calling you to suffer even more, but for the sake of serving the church system, for the sake of choosing and serving the government system, rather than suggesting, if you really stand up for what matters to the justice message of Jesus, you are going to come in conflict with the state. You're going to come in conflict with your religious authorities. You're going to come in conflict with societal status quo standards.
Wherever the injustice resides.
Wherever it lies, it's not for the sake of standing up for others or standing up for your personal abuse. They're saying, no, meekly, submissively put up with.
Yeah, just
just do that. And Jesus is saying, no, don't put up with injustice. Don't put up with people harming other people. Don't put up with people harming you.
Mm-hmm.
Stand up for yourself. Stand up for your loved ones. Stand up for the people in your community who don't have a voice. Stand up for them. Just know that will bring the attention of the authority figures who want to keep the status quo. There will be pushback, but keep standing up.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, this may seem to some like just like a subtle difference in our interpretation here, but I think it makes all the difference in the world in how Jesus followers respond to abuse, injustice, oppression, suffering. Jesus is saying, when they threaten you with a cross, and this is important too, the cross is not intrinsic to following Jesus. Love and justice are intrinsic to following Jesus. The cross only comes into our Jesus following when the changes in the context of justice that we're calling for, when those changes threaten those who are benefiting from the present injustice, when they feel threatened, when they choose to bring a cross into the picture to say, if you keep speaking out, this is what we're going to do to you. The cross was the way Rome kept revolt from erupting and threatening the Pax Romana, from threatening the status quo, right?
That's right.
So when Jesus says, be willing to take up a cross, he's saying, be willing to experience the pushback of whatever unjust system you're speaking out against. Just keep speaking out.
That's right. And I think, we saw this example recently played out. I think to see the full implication of this is you look at Navalny with Russia. You look at a man who spent his life trying to fight against severe corruption, dictatorial violence by the hands of Putin. And you see Navalny trying to speak against that, trying to work against the system, and And he chose to keep standing up for it, and he knew it put a target on his back, and it ultimately got to him. But he chose to continue to stand up for it. You know, the fortunate thing for us living in this country is we're not as immediately at risk of losing our lives for standing up for something, but we can be economically harmed for standing up to that. Herb has experienced that. You can be societally cast to the margins. You can be kicked out of your congregation. You can be jailed for protest. There are certain things that things that you may face as you're standing up for those on the margins. But like you said, you don't get into that work to die. And
That's
I think
true.
this is one of those things, and I know you're going to come to this in a minute. Jesus didn't get into this work for the purpose of dying. He just knew that in order to stand up for what he was standing up for, that that he may personally end up suffering as a result of what he was doing, but he was willing to do it for the sake of the people he loved. And I think so. Those of us who have spent some time standing up for people on the margins, for injustice being done, we've done it because we've actually experienced a more vibrant life by being in relationship with those on the margin. We've experienced a more vibrant life in some small way, walking in the steps of Jesus, that the life is better this way than just being silent and going with a status quo. But at the same time, when you get into this type of work, you start realizing there are real implications that could happen to you for sticking up for yourself or others.
That's right. That's right. We know each other so well, Todd. You made reference to, and I can't help it. Every time we talk about this topic, one of my favorite critiques, what we're really talking about is the critique of the myth of redemptive suffering. And that's the idea that if we suffer passively or willingly at the hands of our abusers, that there's the potential there for our suffering to change the hearts and minds of our oppressors, of our abusers.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's that counsel that has been so lethal to so many. But one of my favorite personal critiques of that, of the myth of redemptive suffering and of the theology that surrounds that myth, is an article called "God So Loved the World?" by Brown and Parker. And if you just Google "God So Loved the World?" Brown and Parker, you'll find it. I think at healingreligion.org. It's a free. They host that essay. I mean, it's a lengthy essay, but it's well worth the read. But they host that essay for free. You can find it there. You can also find it at renewedheartministries.com, various places there, because I mention it repeatedly through the years. But one of the things that they do such a good job of pointing out is that Jesus didn't choose death. And I understand what I don't want to critique Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I understand, I've never had to face what he was facing in Nazi Germany yet. I understand what he was trying to say when he said, when Christ calls you to follow him, he calls that person to die. I understand what he meant in that context, but I appreciate the way Brown and Parker say it instead, which is Jesus didn't choose to die. He chose to live. And when they threatened him with a cross, he refused to let go of the way of life. The question is not, do we really want to die? The question is, do we really want to live? And are we willing to, even when threatened, not let go of our hold on life? And that helps me make sense, I think, of the last portion of this passage, which is, what does it profit you if you gain the whole world but you lose your
Mhm.
soul. That dynamic there, and gaining the whole world is taking whatever they're offering you, whatever bribe, instead of the cross, taking the bribe, whatever they're offering you to be silent. What does it profit you if you gain the whole world through being silent in the face of injustice, and yet you lose your soul? And he's not talking about post-mortem location. He's talking about you lose your humanity. There's a part of you that you lose
Mhm.
touch with,
Mhm.
and it's about in this same context, it's about not choosing to die, but refusing to let go of the path of life, of what is life giving, refusing to let go of your humanity, refusing to let the system change you. You're going to continue calling out to change the system. Whether the system ever changes or not, you're not going to let it change you. You're still going to live on a path where you're at least calling for the system itself to change instead. And I think that's a significant distinction between the way this passage is typically interpreted and a more life-giving interpretation from womanists, from feminist, womanist scholars, throughout the years that have pointed this out. I've only mentioned two, Brown and Parker, this morning, but another one is Dolores Williams, her book Sisters in the Wilderness. All of these are great resources. If the idea that redemptive suffering is a myth, if that's new to you, and the call for those who preach that theology to cease and desist, if that's new for you, I want to recommend those resources.
Yeah. And again, this understanding of why Christ goes to the cross, not because God ordained it and prophesied it from the Hebrew scriptures, but
Because he
Jesus
was speaking
simply
out.
because he was speaking out and was going to stand up for the people he loved and not be silenced. And the only way they could silence him was killing him.
Hmm.
Um, this is this challenges. I mean, and we're not going to go deep into this today, but this undermines and challenges the whole concept of atonement theory.
Yeah,
Um,
very much
we've
so.
and we've talked about that in the past. But this changes the whole trajectory of the salvific story
Mhm.
that Jesus is trying to tell. There is no doubt that Jesus is carrying out a ministry of salvation. It is just not it is not in the way that that the traditional Christianity through atonement theory has projected it. We are talking about bringing about a just world through the life-giving power of Christ rather
Yeah.
than by people getting their sins forgiven through a substitutionary or other form of atonement that traditional and especially now evangelical Christianity espouse.
Yeah, yeah. Because in this context, the cross is not salvific or redemptive. It's not. It's the state execution of someone who was speaking out against injustice,
Mhm.
and that's what it is. That's their
It's
attempt
somebody
to
trying
try
to
to silence.
stop the work
Yes,
of salvation
they're
rather
trying
than
to silence Jesus's salvific voice, and
yes.
that adds new meaning to the narrative element. Whatever you theologically or scientifically believe about the resurrection, narratively, the point of the resurrection is the empire silenced Jesus, stopped Jesus, attempted to stop Jesus, but
Mhm.
instead 3 days later everything that was accomplished through the death of Jesus was undone, overcome, and reversed. And that ceasing, that stopping, it ended up being just an interruption, and
Mhm.
Jesus's teachings now live on in the lives and teachings of his followers.
That's
And
right.
so that it does have theological implications, but again, I cannot recommend highly enough that article, God So Loved the World, question mark,
Mm.
especially if these are new thoughts to anyone who's listening this morning.
Mm. All right. You got anything else for us?
That's what I got this week. Be careful
All
with
right.
this passage. Don't teach people to suffer. Teach people to keep speaking out.
Hey,
Even
anything you
when
want to
the
talk about? Just
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, even when they threaten you with the cross, keep speaking out.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, anything you want to share about your book?
Hey, it's on Amazon. It's available right now. We just keep getting rave reviews. It was a number one bestseller for a little bit there. It was a number one new release for a little bit there. You can find Finding Jesus, the story of a fundamentalist preacher who unexpectedly discovered the social, political, and economic teachings of the Gospels. Available now on Amazon. As a matter of fact, I just got a message. My publisher just posted this morning. I didn't plan on, you brought this up. I didn't plan on sharing this, but let me just say this. My publisher posted this one of the reviews from Amazon on Facebook this morning. It said, in compelling prose, Herb Montgomery opens the reader to a Jesus that many Christians and especially evangelicals have never seen before. And then a person responds underneath, I love this book. Thank you. My knowledge and understanding of the work of Jesus has grown because of you. So yeah, it's a hot ticket item right now. So if you haven't gotten your copy, check it out on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle. You can get it on the paperback. Also, you'll be able to soon get it on Amazon. But I also got another message from my publisher this morning.
You mean Audible?
Going on, yeah, Audible, an audiobook on Audible. But the narrator for the book just got to certain sections of the book and thought it was too controversial and dropped out. So now we're looking for a book reader. I've never heard
Way
of
to
that
go.
happening before. I know.
Way to go.
I've never heard of that happening before. But he said, no, I just can in good conscience. And, I think it's the section, and I'm making a huge assumption there, but it's an affirming book. And there are sections when you get to it. I was wondering what the narrator was going to do. And, he might be a little bit more theologically conservative than what the book tolerates. So anyway, we're looking, there will be an audiobook. I've got all kinds of samples to listen to this afternoon to try to find another narrator.
It'd be great if you get some audio outtakes of the narrators who refuse to read your book, where they say, oh my goodness, no, I can't. Stop the tape. Stop the tape.
Pretty bad.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, man.
Yeah,
well, anyway. Well, thanks for giving us the update. Glad it's doing so well. And of course, you can find anything else related to Herb at renewedheartministries.com. Thank you all for joining us. Sorry we got this out a little bit late this week. We had a scheduling hookup, and we'll be back with y'all next week. Y'all
have a great week, everyone. Thanks for listening.